Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into just one source, but it's a really interesting one. It's from a gardener's personal notes. The title kind of says it all. Notes on Gardening, Part 695. Why I Admire Orchids from a Distance. Came out very recently, October 24th, 2025. Now this gardener, they sound really curious, always wanting to experiment. They mention a few plants they're interested in, adenium, roses, and then orchid. They talk about its spectacular beauty. So here's the question, the puzzle really, that we want to explore. If you love learning about plants this much and you admire something like an orchid, why? Why make the choice not to get one?
Yeah, that's the core tension, isn't it? That pull between loving how something looks, that aesthetic desire, and then the practical reality of commitment. Our mission here is to really understand the line this gardener has drawn. They clearly appreciate the orchid, but they've set this very high bar before they'll actually bring one home. We're going to connect some very relatable things, like time and money limits with a really advanced technical skill. It's quite a jump.
Okay, let's get into their reasoning first. Because they obviously get the appeal, they talk about experimenting, and the orchid is right there with adenium and roses. But even with that beautiful bloom they describe, the conclusion is clear. They're content to simply admire it rather than acquire one. That's quite a statement.
It is. And I think that contentment is it sounds like a calculated decision. The notes are pretty direct about why they're keeping their distance. It's not about emotion. It's practical. Logistics. Two main things pop up: the extra maintenance involved and, frankly, the cost of keeping an orchid happy.
Right, and we should probably pause there. Because comparing the effort needed for an orchid versus, say, a rose or an adenium, it's a big difference, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A huge difference. What does that extra cost and maintenance really mean?
Yeah, what are we talking about specifically?
We're talking about needing specialized stuff. A rose. Usually you put it in the ground, maybe a pot, feed it, prune it. It handles normal conditions, more or less. Adeniums, those desert roses, even tougher. They like it dry, pretty low maintenance. Orchids, though, especially the ones with those really spectacular flowers, they often need special growing media, not soil, right? Bark chips, sphagnum moss, things like that.
Yeah.
And their needs are just precise. You need controlled humidity, often pretty high, like 50, maybe 70%, specific temperatures. Very careful watering, often with special water like distilled or rainwater.
Wow, okay, so it's not just more time. It's almost like environmental engineering on a small scale.
Exactly. And that hits the other point they mentioned, the wallet size.
Right.
Controlling humidity might mean buying humidifiers or maybe even a dedicated enclosure like a terrarium. Temperature control could need special grow lights or heating mats. Even repotting isn't simple. It's careful work, often using specific, sometimes expensive potting mixes.
So the gardener's looking at all this and thinking, this isn't just adding one more plant, this changes my whole setup.
Precisely. It requires a shift in their infrastructure, you could say, and they've clearly weighed the cost, financial cost and time cost against just enjoying the look of the flower. And for now, looking wins.
That makes a lot of sense, a very clear, practical line.
Yeah.
But then here's where the notes take a really interesting turn. The gardener mentions this sort of escape clause, a specific condition that would actually make them take the leap and get an orchid.
Yes. And this is where it shifts from, everyday gardening challenges to something much more advanced.
Yeah.
High-level skill building. The notes say the only reason they'd acquire an orchid is if they decided to really learn and master the skill of micropropagation.
Micropropagation. Okay, for those of us, myself included maybe, who aren't deep into botany beyond basic gardening, why that specific skill? Why not something else like grafting? What is micropropagation?
All right. Well, micropropagation is kind of the peak of plant cloning techniques. The source explains it well. It's a plant tissue culture method. You use it for cloning plants really quickly in large numbers. Instead of taking a cutting or planting a seed, you're taking tiny, tiny pieces of plant tissue, often from the growing tips, the meristem. And you grow these pieces in a totally sterile lab environment. Yeah, on a special gel, like a agar packed with nutrients.
That sounds much more like a science lab than a garden shed.
Oh, it absolutely is lab work. Sterility is key. You have to prevent contamination from mold, bacteria, everything. It's meticulous.
Okay, so why is that the escape clause? Why does mastering that justify getting the orchid?
Because it changes the entire reason for having the plant. The orchid stops being just a beautiful thing to look after. It becomes a scientific tool, a subject. It's the medium for learning and perfecting this really complex, high-level technical skill. The goal isn't just enjoying the bloom anymore. It's mastering the process of micropropagation.
Ah, okay. So the cost and the effort suddenly have a different kind of payoff. It's not about affording fancy potting mix, it's about mastering sterile technique.
Right.
But hang on, couldn't this just be a way to rationalize wanting the plant? If they really wanted the orchid, wouldn't they just buy one and figure out the humidity? Why bring in something as complex as micropropagation?
That's a fair question. It digs into their motivation, right?
Hmm.
But the notes suggest something about the gardener's personality. It seems they aren't put off by difficulty itself. They're put off by maybe the tedious kind of difficulty, the daily grind of checking humidity, managing temperature constantly. Micropropagation, while incredibly difficult, offers a different kind of challenge. It's structured, it has clear steps, a defined goal. Get the tissue culture going, multiply it, get the clones to survive outside the lab. The intellectual reward seems much higher to them than just keeping one plant alive in a specific environment.
So the goal itself changes the value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The orchid would be acquired specifically to hone that skill. It turns this high-maintenance pretty thing into essentially equipment for a scientific project. A high-effort one, but a project nonetheless.
I see the shift now. The motivation makes sense in that context. So they've done the research, they've set this, theoretical goal, but then the notes bring it back down to earth, the practical side of actually setting up this home lab.
Right. That's the next hurdle.
And it sounds like a big one.
It is. The research showed, yes, you can technically do micropropagation at home. It's possible. But the setup, the logistics, that's where the barrier really hits. The notes talk about a significant commitment of effort.
And what does that actually involve? What makes it so significant? This is where the plan stalled, right?
Yeah, exactly. The biggest thing, the core of it, is maintaining that sterility we talked about. To reliably transfer tissue without contamination, you really need a sterile workspace. And that usually means getting a laminar flow hood.
A what now?
A laminar flow hood. It's basically a cabinet that constantly blows highly filtered air, HEPA, filtered across the workspace, keeping airborne contaminants out.
Okay, that sounds specialized. And probably not cheap.
Not cheap and not small. It's a dedicated piece of lab equipment. That's a major commitment right there.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond the hood, you need stuff to prepare the growing media, that agar gel. That means precise scales, specific chemicals, maybe glassware. And then you have to sterilize the media itself.
How do you do that at home?
Usually with a pressure cooker, a big one, or ideally a small autoclave, which is like a medical-grade sterilizer, to make absolutely sure there are no bacteria or spores left.
So we've gone way beyond buying a bag of special orchid mix. This is like setting up a small, specialized chemistry and biology lab corner in your house.
That's a perfect way to put it. You need the space, the equipment, the chemicals,
Mm-hmm.
but also the procedures. You have to develop routines, standard operating procedures, just like in a real lab. You need storage for supplies.
It's not just a weekend project you can pack away.
No, definitely not. It requires dedicating a specific, probably permanent space. It's a deep dive into a whole new hobby that brings its own infrastructure demands. It's a real immersion.
And that level of commitment, setting up that infrastructure, the notes are very clear. That's something the gardener is not currently ready to make.
Exactly.
So after all that research and consideration, the status quo holds. For now, the decision remains. Appreciate orchids as they are, continue to learn about them, and enjoy their aesthetic beauty from afar.
It really is a masterclass in pragmatic planning, isn't it?
Yeah.
They didn't just shrug and give up. They identified the next level challenge to micropropagation. They figured out what it would take. And then they made a conscious choice to postpone it based on resources. They acknowledge their current limits, time, space, money, are focused elsewhere right now.
It's like managing your ambition, almost. Instead of lowering the bar for the plant, just accepting the high maintenance, they raised the reason for the effort, making it about the advanced skill. But when the entry costs for that skill became clear, they paused the whole thing. Very methodical.
That synthesis is key, I think. The notes show this really clear boundary. It's defined by practical things: time, effort, money. And what's fascinating is the curiosity is still there, right, for the plant and for the technique. But the sheer logistics of setting up for the technique, that's the final gatekeeper. Knowledge meets the real world, and for now, the real world constraints win.
So what does this imply for the future? It sounds like a definite maybe later. The plan isn't dead, just deferred. Setting up that home lab is explicitly tagged as a goal for the future.
Yeah, that tells us a couple things. First, the interest, that intellectual spark, it's still there. It's just been filed away,
Yeah.
And second, they actually have a very specific trigger for when they will get the orchid. It's not just when I have more time or when I feel like it. It's when I'm ready to invest in the flow hood, the autoclave, the whole sterile setup, then the orchid comes home. but not just for its looks. It comes home as the raw material for that big experiment.
It's a fascinating journey, really, balancing that desire with the practical reality. All neatly captured in part 695 of someone's gardening notes. We see the initial hurdles, cost, maintenance, pretty clear.
Absolutely. But think about the long game here. The gardener explicitly says they will continue to learn about them. So the knowledge is still building up piece by piece. The practical barrier setting up the lab is very concrete. Physical equipment, space, cost. So it makes you wonder, doesn't it, for this gardener, or maybe even for you listening, what specific piece of knowledge, what final insight about orchids, or maybe about mastering micropropagation theory? What would finally tip the scales? What provides that last push needed to say, okay, now I'm ready for that significant commitment of effort and actually start building the lab?
That's a great question. How much learning has to happen before the action feels justified, especially when the cost of that action is so high? Something to think about. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into distance, desire, and the dedication demanded by the truly spectacular orchid.